Hello there. I have nothing witty to say today, so we'll cut straight to it. It's time for BS. I can't get it in frame. With S.A.C. For those of you joining us for the first time, that stands for Bedtime Stories with Sean Arthur Cox. Also, you missed like 3/4 of the book, so good luck knowing what's going on. When last we left off, William had encountered a sword in the stone scenario, and he went to pull the sword out. It did not come out, and so he just stole it. Sword, stone, everything. Shoved it in his bottomless bag. And we'll see what he intends to do with a stolen magic sword that he can't use because it's stuck in a rock. Chapter 17. Old Acquaintances. The road to Freeport held no new challenges, a blessing for the tired heroes and Bloody John. And it had been a long night full of danger and misery, but they could see the sun rising, its soft halo warming the earth and illuminating its mysteries. And they felt a renewed sense of hope and wonder. The city gate, which to William felt like the gates to the whole world, opened wide to them, welcoming them home. The world would be all right. Early mornings in Freeport had a certain innocent magic to them that no other time of day had. The sun still hung low in the sky, and the mists that rose from the World River in the night still clung tightly to the ground, lit with a golden glow. Seabirds sang from the tops of crows' nests and mizzenmasts, and the gentle lapping of waves against the docks and the steady groan of wooden boats swaying side to side filled the air with a nautical music not found anywhere else in the world but port towns. The salty scent of a cool breeze rising up from the waters invigorated the senses, alerting William to the quiet beauty of a harbor morning. It felt like home. Maybe not his home, but someone's, and his soul felt at peace for the first time in weeks. Only the great and the good woke with the sun. The scum and refuse still rested in back alleys and horse stalls, or if they had a really lucky go of things, beds. Their wild nights of heavy drinking kept them asleep until noon or later, allowing the decent, law-abiding folk of Freeport to complete their tasks and errands and return home in time to lock their doors and ready their defenses. William and company walked through the open-air markets, mingling without fear of pickpockets or alley rats or bludgers. They purchased a few pieces of fresh fruit of decent quality at a fair price and made their way to the Drowned Rat to meet with Ollivander.
"So, how was your first quest?"
Ollie asked, biting into an apple. "Technically," said William, "my first quest was when I went for firewood, since a quest is a search, or, barring that, when I came to find you."
Yes, it doesn't count as a quest unless there's some adventure to it."
"But there was," William protested.
"A really long run? A couple of wolves? That's not adventure, that's morning calisthenics. You're an adventurer now, a hero. Tell me about this dungeon."
"Tomb," corrected Marcus. "Shrine," said William, thinking on the janitors and goblins and overly complex traps. "It was enlightening."
"I bet it was,"
Ollie said, with a hearty slap to the back. William nearly choked on his orange slice.
"Tell me about it."
"Oh, not much to tell, I suppose. There were traps and monsters and things. I really didn't actually do that much."
"Modesty doesn't become a hero, boy. I'm sure you slayed all manner of beasts and fought your way past a score of cunning traps."
"Sort of. The traps were..."
So did you get any good loot?"
Bloody John asked. "Yeah," William said. The others eyed him eagerly as he considered whether or not he should tell them about the sword of McFinn. Probably better not. Not yet, anyway. Just a dagger that cuts through anything and some boots that make you step really quiet. And Marcus.
"I'm not loot," Marcus said with a grin. Then he added, "though I am quite a treasure."
He laughed. Ollivander laughed. Everyone laughed except William. Bravado held no appeal for him. He might save the day, rescue the princess, defeat villains, but he didn't think he could ever play the role of the hero. The swagger and boasts weren't his style. They felt unnatural to him, alien. Why would he want to go on and on about how there were great evils in the world that needed facing? It seemed so depressing, and to brag about any imagined invulnerability seemed to invite others to test those limits. Bragging only led to two things: problems and bigger problems. He just didn't understand it. Maybe it was a chosen thing. "When do you think we'll head out?" William asked.
"Oh, after breakfast, I suppose. Once we take care of that problem we discussed yesterday.
Ollivander said. Vilius Unferth Bloodstone. He had completely forgotten. The man deserved it, but William still felt uncomfortable about killing people. Even so, the mayor embodied evil, plain and simple. Something had to be done about him. Ollivander could do it. Or Marcus. Ollivander saw through the man's disguise, and Vilius had personally betrayed Marcus. Surely they had more right to handle the situation than he did. Yeah, he would let them do it. They finished their meal, and William and Ollivander packed their things. Bloody John had no things to pack, and Marcus lived in town, so they mostly just sat back and watched. When they finished, the four men walked downstairs, paid their bill, and left. Their plan for finding Vilius was simple. Walk around town with Marcus until the villain reared his ugly head. It did not take long. "Boy," Vilius called, arms outstretched as though welcoming a long-lost family member. "My name is William. So wonderful to see you've rescued my brother," he said, bitter as black coffee and bad beer. "And alive, too. How shall I ever repay you?" William, Ollivander, and Marcus scowled. "Oh, money do, I suppose," Bloody John said, helpfully breaking the silence. All eyes gave him looks that told him to stop speaking. A crowd had gathered around, watching the spectacle unfold. It had started early, the wholesome citizenry following Marcus and Ollivander, and to a lesser extent, William and Bloody John. They could sense change in the air, hovering on the tips of these four men's swords. Of course, by the time they met Vilius, the more wretched of Freeport's populace had also woken and begun following the mayor about, sensing blood in the air. The Cretan also had the benefit of a heavily armed detachment of city guards at his back as well. The four men were outnumbered a lot to one. Ollivander, Bloody John, and Marcus smiled to one another. These were their kinds of odds. William, however, sweated, trying to keep calm. He much preferred the number to favor his side. "Brother," Marcus said, "you've betrayed me. You've dispatched a band of your own lackeys to kill me while I sought the very tools to save this foul city. You tried to claim power unfit for your hands to better enslave its population. On behalf of the good people of Freeport, I ask you to step down." "I'm hurt, brother," Vilius said. "I expected more of you, spreading slander of a most foul and egregious nature against me, no doubt preparing for an unjust rebellion. I have no choice but to place you and your comrades under arrest for sedition to be tried by a court of your peers on grounds of treason." Vilius licked his lips, rather reminding William of a serpent. "Unless, of course, you choose to resist." William spotted a rustling in the crowd, which parted to let a band of pirates through, the roughest-looking crew of sailors any present had ever seen. The cadre of criminals, William noticed, was led by none other than Captain Longshanks, who now wore a crimson scar that stretched from left eye to right jaw. His sneer revealed a mad clench of teeth that looked as though they could bite through a cannon. He held his cutlass out, pointing directly at William's meek and unthreatening frame. Vilius, Longshanks barked. I'm glad I could find ya." "Honorable Captain Longshanks," Vilius said, grinning. William recognized the setup immediately. What should bring you and your respectable crew to my fine town?" "This knave and his villainous associates have destroyed my ship, which is full of blankets and medicines and ponies for all the orphans of the world. Can you believe the disgraceful sons of bastards?" "I cannot," Vilius said, clutching his hand to his chest like a bit player struggling with his first dramatic role. "I am shocked and appalled. Not only treason, but terrorism too, and against our most respected citizenry to boot. I fear that as mayor of this good and virtuous town of Freeport, I must personally exercise my power as final judge in all matters, much though it pains me to do so, to condemn these four foul fiends to return to the hellish depths from which they have risen. The sentence is death, to be carried out immediately." Guards and pirates alike moved in to execute the four, bloodlust burning in their eyes. Vilius stepped back, letting them pass, and wrung his hands tightly as his twisted smile mocked all that he saw. Marcus and Ollivander exchanged a nod, which Bloody John repeated. William, on the other hand, shook his head in a terrified, "No!" It didn't matter. Before William could think, Ollivander had already pulled the scimitar from William's belt and planted it firmly in the gut of one of the pirates, who fell to the ground. As the pirate dropped, Ollivander grabbed hold of the sword and the dead man's belt, freeing the blade as the body collapsed to the ground. Within the blink of an eye, Ollivander had gone from being unarmed to wielding two readied weapons. In a single assault, he slashed both blades in wide arcs, cleanly severing the head of the guard directly in front of him and hacking a broad, bloody wounds into the men on the other side. Marcus followed suit, pulling his own blade and slipping it effortlessly between the ribs of one of the corrupt city guards. As a look of total surprise encompassed the guard's face, his hand released their grip on his halberd, which Marcus caught on his foot and kicked up to his free hand. He pulled the sword quickly from the dead man's chest and spun at his hands before slinging it to the side, impaling a pirate William didn't even realize had crept within striking distance of the boy. In one fluid motion, Marcus swung the poleaxe at a pirate, cleaving his legs above the knees, and followed up the blow by continuing the rotation, bringing his hands together near the blade and bashing in the helmet of another guard close by. Bloody John pulled out his own cutlass and hacked his way into his own mob of pirates and constables, grabbing a dropped short sword as he went. His blades flew wildly through the air, leaving red mists and mangled corpses in their wake. A true berserker, his swords tore through flesh like claws, rending their prey, and his blood-curdling howl made many of the mob's nastier element take a step back. His name suited him to a gore-covered T. William, on the other hand, had no kills to his name within the first moments of the fight. He did have a puddle of vomit in front of him, an unfortunate side effect of witnessing so much brutal slaughter in such a short period of time. Mostly he ducked and dodged, causing this guard and that brigand to slip in the pool of sick at his feet. He made sure to kick them when they were down. Though the blows came in unending flurries, he parried with his dagger as he was able, which would have felt inconsequential were it not for the growing pile of broken weapons that began to surround him, the product of his ever-sharp dagger at work. In the midst of it all, Villius cackled a foul and bone-chilling laugh. "Fools! Fight as you please, but in the end I shall win, for I am unbound by your morals and your virtues. I have limitless armies at my beck and call because they fear me. Fear drives the world, and I shall be its master. Starting at Freeport, I will parade your corpses across the 12 realms, a warning to those foolish enough to—" He stopped speaking. At roughly the same instant, an axe took off his head. Ollivander wiped the blood from his blade and spit on the corpse. I hate it when they monologue. After Villius's head took an unplanned vacation from his neck, the guards cautiously pulled from the fray. The few remaining pirates did likewise. Though the battle had only lasted a matter of seconds, the ground around the heroes lay almost knee-deep in the dead. William eased his feet from the piles of gore and stepped away from the macabre mound, his trembling hands barely placing his dagger back in his belt. As he did, he noticed Longshanks slipping away through the crowd. "Marcus!" he shouted, pointing. "Longshanks!" "As sole surviving member of the Bloodstone family, I claim by right and by blood the title of mayor. As your mayor, I command you to get that man!" The few remaining guards, having barely survived the massacre, wasted not a moment seizing Longshanks, as both an effort to appease their new leader and put as much distance between them and his blades as possible. A dozen hands clutched at the pirate captain and carried him overhead back to the gruesome pile. His weapons had been lifted in the process by an opportunistic thief, but no one begrudged having the scourge of the seas illegally disarmed. He howled in rage, but none cared, or at least none dared care enough to tempt the wrath of Marcus. When the pirate reached the clearing in which the heroes stood, each dripped with the blood of their foes. Guards pressed his shoulders hard, forcing him to his knees. "Captain Jervis Longshanks," Marcus said, resting the blade of his seized halberd on the pirate's shoulders. "You have lived a life of corruption, your every act an abomination against decency." William leaned in to Ollivander for a whisper. "Are these dramatic speeches and show trials common?" "Show trials?" Ollivander asked, cocking an eyebrow. "Yeah," William said. "Like trials, but not real trials. You know, no jury, no deliberation, no presentation of evidence, no case for the defense, just flowery speeches and grand statements and then summary execution." "I still don't follow." "Let me put this another way. Is this the way trials are carried out, to your understanding?" "Yes." His answer was frank, honest, somewhat confused. "All I needed to know," William said. This, he realized, is what heroes did. He'd heard tales about epic battles, about men facing off against whole contingents of city guards, but they were stories, clean and sterile, full of romance. This was real. The bodies, the unflinching willingness to take a life, the stench of hot blood and death and the gore that caked the righteous and the dead alike. William beheld the unsanitized truth behind every legend's great victory. The line between hero and villain was very thin indeed, and for the first time in his life, William felt proud to be a simple farmer. Marcus's speech was winding down. The inevitable end drew near, and William had no interest in seeing any more blood. He couldn't fathom how he would stomach a full-on war. He turned away from the mob, the execution at hand, and tried to make his way back to the hotel. A hand caught him, held him in place. Ollivander's. Terrific.
"Not yet, William," he said. "A proper ending is as important as a good beginning. Every part matters." "And so, Jervis Longshanks," Marcus concluded after a lengthy speech enumerating the man's many, many sins, "I pronounce sentence. You are condemned to death for your long and sordid history of maliciousness and depravity. William?" The boy practically broke his neck on the double take.
"Yes?"
He really didn't want to hear what he knew Marcus intended to say. "As the man who brought Longshanks and the scalawag low, you shall have the honor of carrying out the sentence." He held a blade out, an offer. Though the blood had been wiped from it, William knew Marcus had taken the blade from one of the dead pirates early on, and used it during the battle moments prior to kill members of Longshank's crew. He took the cleaned cutlass into his shaking hands and rested it on the pirate's neck. The crowd watched eagerly, hungry for more blood. He trembled, and the unsteady blade nicked the captain's flesh, tracing a line of liquid crimson. His heart pounded, threatening to explode from his chest. His breathing became shallow, staggered. He could no longer hear the chanting of the crowd, or the wind, or the legendary pirate's cruel taunts. Only the sharp, shallow breaths he struggled to control. Longshanks raised his eyes, black and merciless, and pierced William with his sadistic gaze. Even so close to death, he sneered, and it chilled him to the bone, down to his very soul. Though Longshanks never touched him, William would be haunted for years by the myriad sadistic acts he could see in the captain's eyes, things he wanted to do, in vivid detail. "Do it, boy!" The pirate's lips curled as he said the words. His eyebrows furrowed. The blade shook, spreading the cut by inches as the blood trickled down. The sword swam in circles around the boy, and he panted, his mouth an arid wasteland. He blinked, unable to focus, shook his head and to steady the spinning. Sweat poured down his forehead, but nary a drop of moisture could be found in his parched throat. "Do it!" William lowered the blade, burying its tip in the dirt. The crowd seemed none too pleased with his course of action. Marcus almost balked, and Bloody John chomped at the bit to take the opportunity if William didn't want it. Ollivander looked on, stoic as a statue. He would have to do this on his own. "What are you doing, William?" whispered Marcus through clenched teeth, glaring. "Well, He stammered to find the words. For an instant he almost thought Ollivander had given him a nod. A sense of courage coursed through his veins. So this was what confidence was like. I think there's been enough blood. For too long the city has had a reputation for murder and theft and other manner of evil. I think as a sign for all the realms to see that Freeport hungers for violence no longer, that this is a town of peace, prosperity, and justice, I hereby relinquish rights to his life, placing it instead in the hands of the people that he may serve the remainder of his years, forced to rebuild the devastation his sordid career has wrought." Ollivander rested his heavy hand on William's shoulder, leaning down to whisper, "You did good, kid." "You think so?" The boy's smile beamed, bright enough to kill vampires. "I do. Now let's get out of here before the crowd gets mad. They usually get cranky when deprived of their beloved public executions." The two turned and wove their way through the crowd to the city gates. Bloody John chased them as best he could, begging William to reconsider, to let him take the swing on Longshanks. William simply laughed and continued on his way. He had survived an adventure taken of his own accord, and helped restore order to a lawless city. He made an honest-to-goodness difference in the world, and now, after far too long, he was almost home, where, with a bit of luck, he might just save the day again. After all, he had the world's greatest hero at his side, and the world's greatest sword in his bag. True, it had been stolen. True, he couldn't pull the thing from the stone. True, he remained as of yet one of the many,
He remained, as of yet, one of the many masses for whom the gods had set aside no grand destiny, no path to fame, riches, and glory. But that hadn't stopped him yet. He was William the Unchosen. Villains hide your cunning schemes, and oracles lock up your prophecies. He had no intentions of honoring either. The world was his to explore as he pleased, to make a difference where he could without a divine calling to do so, because he chose to. He had chosen himself. Maybe adventuring wasn't so bad after all. At the edge of town, William stopped Ollivander, pulled him by the arm to a garrison at the city's entrance. It was a small, one-room building along a low wall, a token defense. 2 guards kept eyes on the road leading out. William tapped the taller one on the shoulder, who seemed none too pleased at the intrusion. "There's a fine for touching a city guard. I suggest you pay up. That is, of course, unless you want me to stick you on the stocks. Mayor Villiers loves to see a man in the stocks." "Yeah, about that," William said. "I'd like you to meet my friend Ollivander." "This the one said I'd gone soft?" Ollie asked. "Yep." Ollivander's hands were back in his pockets before the guard realized he'd been punched in the face. And that's the end of that chapter. Tune in next time when we'll see if Barrow's End is still standing. Until then, have good dreams and good night.